Who could have imagined that the once famous Saw franchise would become the pinnacle of suspense series? As the intriguing plot twists outweigh the gory scenes depicted in the show, the endings and revelations in the films always catch viewers off guard. Today, we continue with Saw 4. Trevor wakes up from unconsciousness only to find himself unable to see anything, leaving him bewildered. It dawns on Trevor that his eyelids have been stitched shut, rendering him blind and unaware of his surroundings or what he has encountered. Trevor reaches out to the iron chain locked around his neck, feeling something attached to its other end. The man lying on the ground is also awakened by the pulling of the chain. Startled, seeing this situation, Art is dumbfounded, realizing that his mouth has been sewn shut, rendering him unable to speak. Now, Art is unable to communicate at all. Trevor has no idea who the person opposite him is. Little do they know that the mechanism in between will take their lives. With emotions spiraling out of control and fear setting in due to his inability to see, Trevor inadvertently knocks over a toolbox on the ground. He finds an axe among the tools and throws it towards Art, presuming that Art has kidnapped him. Art, unable to speak, accidentally discovers that the key to unlock the shackles is behind Trevor's neck. Trevor forcefully pulls the iron chain towards himself, triggering the activation switch of the central machinery. The chains binding them are now being retracted. Realizing the dire situation, Art understands that if they fail to free themselves from the restraints, they will eventually be crushed. However, he is currently unable to speak. With no knowledge of the circumstances, Trevor resorts to self-defense, wielding the iron hook weapon he finds on the ground. Art also quickly grabs the axe from the floor. Art, being able to see, knows that communication is futile. In this situation, survival is paramount. Art decides to ambush Trevor, attempting to seize the opportunity to obtain the key. However, he is met with Trevor's counterattack, getting impaled by the iron hook in his leg. In order to stay alive, Art removes the iron hook from his leg. Wielding it as a weapon, he strikes towards Trevor's neck. Art successfully obtains the key and prepares to unlock the chains on his body. Meanwhile, Trevor, still armed, lunges at Art once again. Art, completely provoked, chooses to kill Trevor. Trevor dies on the spot. The police in charge of investigating the locked room case arrived at an underground basement based on the intelligence they received. They discovered traps set up in the area. Understanding that the killer was skilled in their design, for safety reasons, they decided to use a remote-controlled camera to explore the surroundings. In the remote-controlled camera view, they also soon found a hanging woman appeared in the camera. Detective Rigg immediately recognized her as their colleague, Kerry. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Rigg rushed in without hesitation, despite Detective Hoffman's attempts to dissuade him. However, when he reached Kerry, he was shocked by the scene unfolding before his eyes. Kerry had already been killed by the traps set up by the killer, a tragic sight that left all the officers in silence. Kerry's murder caught the attention of the FBI, and they dispatched 2 special agents to join the investigation since she had been their contact. Before Kerry was murdered, they had received an anonymous package containing a set of keys and a message stating, "Open the door, and you will find my clue." However, they had no idea what this message meant. During their investigation, Perez discovered that Kerry had been unshackled, but she was still dead. Based on their previous investigation, they discovered that this was not the work of Jigsaw. Detective Hoffman believed that it was likely the work of Jigsaw's apprentice, Amanda. However, FBI agent Strom disagreed with this theory. Based on Amanda's criminal record, he deduced that as a woman, she couldn't have hoisted a person heavier than herself. Hoffman believed that Amanda might have used some mechanical device to accomplish it, but Strom thought there could be a third party assisting her. To unravel the situation, the police wanted to find a breakthrough with Jill, Jigsaw's ex-wife. However, they didn't obtain any valuable leads from her. Rigg couldn't shake off the distress caused by the misfortunes suffered by his former colleagues, and they still haven't found Detective Eric, who's been missing for a long time. Seeing Rigg's low spirits, Hoffman advised him to go home, rest, and regain his composure. However, that night, Rigg discovered that someone seemed to have broken into his house. As Rigg got up to investigate, he was ambushed and rendered unconscious by a lurking figure dressed in black. When Rigg woke up again, he found himself lying in his own bathtub. Before he could comprehend the situation, he noticed a question mark marked on the door of the bathroom mirror. Quickly, Rigg grabbed a clothes hook from the door to use as a weapon for self-defense. However, as he opened the door, he inadvertently triggered the bedroom's television switch, and a man wearing a clown mask appeared on the screen. Rigg realized that he had become a kidnapped target as well. Aware of the perilous situation, Rigg immediately sought out his firearm as a means of protection. In the videotape, Rigg made a shocking discovery. Detective Eric, who had been missing for 6 months, was still alive, and Detective Hoffman had also been captured by their captors. They were both undergoing the kidnapper's game challenge. Now, they had only 90 minutes left. The man with the clown mask left a clue that Rigg couldn't understand due to his urgent desire to save lives. As Rigg stepped out of the bedroom, he discovered that it was covered in photographs, and a woman wearing a pig mask was bound to a chair. The videotape provided a clue that Brenda, the woman bound there, was once a criminal and would now face punishment in the game. Rigg had the option to ignore Brenda or save her, but as a police officer, he couldn't stand by and do nothing. Unbeknownst to Rigg, the moment he removed the mask, he triggered a mechanical device on the chair. Brenda's hair was tied to the gear shaft, and if the password to stop the device couldn't be found, her hair, along with her scalp, would be forcibly torn off. At this point, Brenda was already feeling the tingling pain in her scalp. Rigg thought of using scissors to cut Brenda's hair, but he realized that the kidnappers had taken away all the tools that could be used to cut hair. In this desperate moment, Rigg discovered that the password was actually on the gear. Having obtained the password, Rigg successfully stopped the gear, but Brenda had already suffered severe head injuries. Rigg wanted to find first aid supplies to help treat Brenda's wounds, but there was nothing there. When he returned, he discovered that Brenda had disappeared without a trace. In a blink of an eye, Brenda found a knife and launched an attack on Rigg from behind. They quickly wrestled and fought, and in a moment of carelessness, Rigg accidentally killed Brenda. It was only then, from the audio tape in Brenda's hands, that Rigg understood the whole story. The kidnapper had told Brenda that even if Rigg saved her, she would still face legal consequences because the incriminating photos left by the kidnapper would be used as evidence against her by the police. Not wanting to go to prison, Brenda chose to attack Rigg. The kidnapper left a new clue for Rigg, mentioning that there were 2 keys in the box, one of which was clearly for a hotel room. Rigg arrived at the designated hotel room and found that the kidnapper had left him a mystery box with a photo of his wife on it. Seeing the exposed hair outside, Rigg felt a sense of dread. When he opened the box, he was relieved to find only a pig mask inside. The kidnapper left an audio clue for Rigg, mentioning that the hotel owner, Ivan, was a pervert, and the adjacent room contained tools for punishing Ivan. If Rigg followed the kidnapper's instructions, he would receive a new clue. On the other hand, at the crime scene of the victim Kerry, another officer found a bullet casing with Detective Rigg's fingerprints on it. This left the police puzzled. Was Rigg a third party helping them? When the police arrived at Rigg's house to arrest him, they found dead Brenda. Detective Strom, based on the clue left on the wall, found photos of Jill on all 4 walls of the room. Perhaps Jill held the key to unraveling the truth. Strom returned to the station and questioned Jill about their past. From here, we can also understand why Jigsaw became a punisher. Years ago, Jigsaw and his wife ran a clinic, and they had a happy life. However, one day after work, a patient returned claiming to have left something in the clinic and wanted to retrieve it, but his true intention was to steal things from inside. When he came out, he didn't notice that Jill was waiting outside, and the collision resulted in Jill having a miscarriage. When Jigsaw brought his wife to the hospital, they had already lost their child. After this incident, Jigsaw underwent a drastic change in personality. To make matters worse, Jigsaw was later diagnosed with cancer. Adding to his despair, he attempted suicide but failed, and this brush with death completely changed his perspective. He decided to become a punisher, targeting those who didn't value their own lives. Jigsaw left his wife and began studying various traps and mechanisms to make these individuals experience their inner fears. The man who caused his wife's miscarriage became Jigsaw's first test subject, and it can be imagined how tragic his fate was. Before Detective Strom could finish questioning, they received an alert that Ivan had been killed using the methods of a game. From the clues left behind, Strom understood why the kidnapper targeted Detective Rigg. The kidnapper's true intention was not for Rigg to save people but to attempt to recruit Rigg to join them as a punisher. Following the clues, Rigg arrived at another location where he saw a couple impaled by steel pipes. The man in front of him looked incredibly familiar, reminding Rigg of a previous case. A girl had called the police claiming her father had physically abused her, but her father vehemently denied it. The girl's mother turned a blind eye to the situation as well. Rigg had confronted Rex, the father, and gave him a beating after Rex tried to provoke him. Later, Rigg faced a complaint from Rex, but who could have imagined that they would be kidnapped and subjected to punishment here? To survive, they had to remove the steel pipes piercing their bodies. Morgan, disregarding her husband's well-being, pulled out the pipes to save herself. The surviving Morgan desperately pleaded with Rigg to give her the key he had obtained earlier so she could save herself. Under Morgan's heartfelt pleas, Rigg eventually decided to leave the key for her. Meanwhile, following the clue, Rigg found a photo of his wife with the letter G written on the back, catching his attention because the previous victims had all encountered hints with the letter G. It instantly reminded Rigg of the files and photos he had seen at the police station. That's where Detective Eric and the others were being held. Eric, who escaped years ago, engaged in a struggle with Amanda, but he was ultimately overpowered. Jigsaw re-imprisoned him for a period of 6 months. Eric couldn't escape the punishment of the game. At this moment, a man in black arrived at the location, unbeknownst to him. As he entered, he triggered a hidden mechanism. The man in black approached the surveillance monitors, seemingly overseeing the two individuals. Detective Eric, who had been tormented for 6 months, had lost all will to live and decided to choose suicide to escape the humiliation. The seesaw device under Eric's feet, once out of balance, causes the ice to melt into water and move towards Detective Hoffman. If the water overflowed, it would have come into contact with the wiring, and Hoffman would have been killed. The man who saw this scene rushed to stop Eric. Meanwhile, the man in black, Hoffman, standing before them, was immediately recognized. He turned out to be the lawyer who accused Rigg of assaulting Rex, the man Rigg had beaten up for abusing his daughter in a previous case. Art, the lawyer, was now also being punished as one of the players in the game. His task was to keep an eye on the two individuals for 90 minutes. If he failed, the mechanical device behind him would end his life. He was the same Art who had been chained up at the beginning. Art gave Detective Eric a gun and a bullet, telling him that if he didn't want to live, he could choose to end his own life. It won't affect Art's mission, but it will probably get his colleague Hoffman killed. To make matters worse, they realized that there were 2 blocks of ice above Eric's head, connected to the triggering switch on the open door by a chain on the mechanical device. If anyone rushed through that door, Eric would be in grave danger. On the other side, Agent Strom and his team were alerted to the scene of the couple's victims. Morgan had already escaped successfully using Rigg's key. Perez discovered a commonality among the 3 victims. They all had the same lawyer. This explained why Art, the lawyer, was selected. Strom and Perez discovered a clue left by the Punisher nearby, but little did they know it was a trap. When Perez attempted to listen closely to the content on a tape recorder, she was attacked by a hidden device concealed behind a clown mask. Perez was rushed to the hospital for treatment, leaving Detective Strom furious. In his moment of calm, Strom unintentionally discovered a photo with a location written by Jigsaw, suspecting it to be the place they were looking for. By now, Agent Riggs has arrived here. This is where Jeff was held in the last film. It's here that Rigg discovers that the Punisher left him a clue, and Agent Strom rushes here. Entering inside, he likewise finds an empty cue box. But then, Strom heard the sound of Jeff's pounding and venting. At this point, everyone must be confused. From Art's surveillance perspective, the director revealed the answer. It turned out that the events in this location were happening simultaneously with the events of the previous installment. Strom followed Jeff's trail, while Rigg found his kidnapped colleagues, Eric and Hoffman, based on the clues. However, Rigg had no idea that opening the door would endanger Eric's life. Inside, Eric had no choice but to shoot to stop Rigg, but Rigg, driven by his desire to save lives, still rushed in. Unaware of the truth, Rigg decisively shot Art, knocking him down. As the mechanism was triggered, Eric's head was directly smashed into fragments by the ice blocks. On the other side, Strom heard the sound of a chainsaw coming from the room. Before he could understand the situation, the door was closed, and when Strom tried to open it, he realized it was impossible. That's when Strom remembers the original key and message that was sent to him anonymously. Using the key to open the door, Strom found Jeff had already killed Jigsaw. Driven by madness, Jeff mistook Strom, the arriving detective, for one of Jigsaw's accomplices. Strom killed Jeff before he could fight back. The scene inside left Strom dumbfounded. Rigg and Art, both shot, lay on the ground, and they started arguing about the door opening incident. Art blamed Rigg for potentially causing their deaths, but Rigg was completely unaware of the truth behind the situation. As Art prepared to retrieve a tape recorder to explain to Rigg, Rigg mistakenly thought he was reaching for a gun. In his impulsiveness, Rigg shot Art, who fell dead. However, the dropped tape recorder revealed the truth of the situation.
Hello, Officer Rigg. If you are hearing this, then you have reached Detective Matthews and Detective Hoffman in under 90 minutes, resulting in their deaths. The rules were clear.
After listening to the recording, Rigg learned that he was responsible for his colleague's death and had failed the test. But then Hoffman broke free and stood right in front of him, and Rigg realized he'd been tricked again. It turned out that Hoffman was also a member of their group. He was the one who had kidnapped Kerry and the others. Even the threatening letters received by Amanda were orchestrated by Hoffman. Everything was in his plan. Even Jigsaw was fooled.
Game over.
Hoffman rushed to the location where Detective Strom was and locked him inside. Just when Hoffman thinks he's got it all under control, the end of the film tells us that it's not over yet. During Jigsaw's autopsy, the forensic examiner discovered a cassette tape inside his stomach. The cassette tape was the one Jigsaw had protected by swallowing it with adhesive before his death, preserving it in his stomach.
Are you there, detective? If so, you are probably the last man standing. Now perhaps you will succeed where the others have failed. You think you will walk away untested. I promise that my work will continue. You think it's over just because I'm dead? It's not over. The games have just begun.